Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to assemble my Christmas village church. This church is one of 3 buildings that I've designed to create a small village that you can use for your Christmas decor. Here you can see the other 2 buildings. There's a small townhouse and a large townhouse as well. I'll include links below for all 3. They are also available to purchase in a full set of 3, and you will save a little bit of money if you purchase the full set. If you like the paper trees you see here, these are my Woodland Christmas trees, and I will provide a link to them below as well. This church sits about 8 inches tall, and as you can see here, you can create your church in 2 different colors. I've done one in white with black trim and the other one in white with beige trim. The window and door trims are something I added just to give it a little bit more life. Of course, you are free to leave these extra details off of your church. Now let's start by looking at what you'll see when you download your folder. Inside the main folder you'll see 2 more folders labeled like you see here. You'll also notice a PDF file along with these 2 folders, and if you open it up you'll see this. These are all the parts you'll be cutting out with labels for each of the parts. But this is not the file you'll use for cutting. It's purely informational so that you can see what each of the parts are, which will be particularly helpful if you're cutting different colors. And back to the folders. For those of you who are using a Cricut machine, if you have a scoring tool attachment for your machine, you'll want to use the SVG file in this folder labeled Yes Scoring Tool. And your file will look like this. These dashed lines you see here will need to be changed to score lines under the operation menu so that your machine will know to score them to create fold lines like this. I do have a full video that goes into more detail about fold lines that I'll link below, and if you're new to the Cricut machine, I encourage you to watch it because it'll walk you through how to prepare your file if you're using a scoring tool. And if you do not have a scoring tool, you'll be using the SVG file in this folder labeled No Scoring Tool. And that file will look like this. These are the exact same shapes as in the Yes Scoring Tool file, but I've made these a different color for distinction. And the important difference here is that the fold lines you see here will be cut as dashed cut lines like this. And in this case, you do not have to do anything to the file. When you send it to cut, the dashed lines will cut as dashed lines. And if you're using another cutter that's not the Cricut, I'm not sure how the scoring tools work with other machines, so feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you just have a blade and no scoring tool, you can also use the No Scoring Tool folder. Alright, moving on to the assembly. Once you've cut out all your parts, they should look like this. And here is a completed church. There are 2 main parts, the main church as well as this steeple. At the back I added this decorative window which is also at the front. However, I'm not going to cover this back window with trim. And if you want trim on this back window, it's just an extra piece you cut that attaches like this. And you'll see in the file that I've duplicated all the window trims for you so that you'll have enough to cover the front and side panels of your church, but none for the back panel. Here is the front panel of the church. There's no wrong way to flip this piece. Whatever you start with will just dictate how the other panel is attached. I'm going to start with it like this, and the first thing you do is make these folds away from you like this. Now you can start to see the body of the church will come together like this, and now take the second panel and figure out which way you need this piece to be. Mine needs to be like this so that I can complete the building and then make your fold. What this will do is help you determine where your color frames are going to go because that will be our next step. For glue, I like to use this tacky glue because it's fast drying. You can use regular white glue, and if you do, you'll just have to hold parts together for a little longer than I do. So for the next step, all we'll be doing is gluing on all our colored frames. And you don't need a lot of glue here, just need some small dots spread out around your piece, making sure to get all the corners. This piece is the front door, and now you place that right on top here, and your holes should all line up. If it's misaligned, you can pick up the whole piece and just gently nudge it in place. Just check that the bottom of that door is lined up to that bottom fold. And now do the same with all the other window frames. And this piece is done for now. We can set it aside to dry while we work on the other side panel. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I won't be gluing any frames to the back panel, so these two windows here are the only ones that will get a frame for this piece. It's a good idea to let those pieces dry for a few minutes, so while we set those aside, we can work on the steeple. Here's my piece. I've already pre-folded the side folds here, and I'll go over the folds again with you later when we assemble it. It doesn't matter which side you glue the frames on for this piece, so just pick a side and attach your frames. And we'll be covering all 4 windows for this one. Now set this aside to dry, and we'll go back to the main body of the church. Starting with this front piece, the first step is to make all the folds. Flip this piece upside down and make all the folds up and towards you. Make sure to get nice crisp creases on those folds. Now do the same with the second piece. Turn it upside down and fold up all the flaps. Then going back to the first piece, it's going to fold in like this, so this is the first flap we'll be covering with glue. Get that flap at a nice right angle and then pull it in and under the base piece. Then press along that glue with your fingers. Next, we are going to attach the other piece like this, and this side piece is going to fold in like this. So we're placing our glue along these 2 flaps. There is another way of assembling this church, and that is to glue both panels together first along the side flap and then bringing it all in to attach to the bottom flap. But you run the risk of things not lining up perfectly, and then the sides won't wrap around the base perfectly. So get your glue on those flaps and then attach it to the bottom panel. I like to get both these panels attached at the same time so that I can make sure it wraps nicely around that corner of the base piece. And now just press down along the glued flaps. Now here, notice my first flap has come unglued, so make sure to just keep going back and checking that all the flaps are in place, and do this repeatedly until your glue is somewhat set. It might be helpful here to use a long tool. I'm using the end of a paintbrush to reach in to press along the glue. And once it's all in place, set this aside to dry for a few minutes before we work on the side seams. I've designed the seams so that when the church is lit up with the tea light, you won't be able to see the flaps through the paper on the face of the church. Where you might be able to see a hint of those flaps is on one side panel and on the back panel, and it's not very noticeable. It's just a small detail, but I thought it was important. So open up one of the sides and place some glue on the flap. Try to reach right into that tight corner. You may have to stretch it open a bit. And this is why it's important to allow for drying time so that one step doesn't open up the gluing you did in the previous step. Then bring the two sides together. This is a good spot to reach in with your tool to secure that seam. And keep checking to make sure your seam hasn't come apart in any places. Next, do the same with the other seam. And when you're done, set this aside and we're going to go back to the steeple. And here's the steeple. Just like the church body, the first thing we're going to do is fold all our flaps. And whichever side you glued your frames onto, you're going to fold the flaps towards the back side. I've already done the side flaps, so I'm just going to do the rest of my flaps here. You may have to look on the other side to see those cut dash lines, and again, make sure these are nice crisp folds. Then put some glue on your side flap and bring the other side in. You can tuck this flap right into this part here on the other side. And just make sure the corners are aligned. Then press to secure. And we'll let this dry and we can work on the steeple roof. This is the steeple piece which will go on right here. So again, make all the folds in the same direction. I'm starting with the end flap and working my way across the whole piece. Now we're going to place glue on this flap. And then pull the other side to close it into the final pyramid shape. Get that flap right up to the fold line and then press it in place. And once that's set, we are going to set this aside and go back to the main building. The next step is to glue these roof folds together so that we have a base to glue our roof onto. First, make sure the side flaps are sitting on top of the center flap. Then we're gluing each side flap onto the bottom flap. And this bottom flap should sit right along that fold line like this, and this will give you the perfect base for your roof piece. So place some glue in that space where your side flap will attach and then bring it down to meet that bottom flap. Now repeat for the other three flaps. I moved to the opposite side of the roof here just to give that first flap a little time to dry. And again, keep going back to check that your flaps stay glued. You can let this dry for a few minutes and then we're going to glue on the roof piece. Here's my roof. Notice this cutout here. This is where the steeple will sit, and this cutout will allow any light to come up and reach the steeple if you're planning on placing tea lights inside this church. So fold your roof piece right along that center fold line, and it's going to sit on the church building like this, with that cutout closer to the front of your church. Another thing to note is there should be a small roof overhang on each side, so when you glue on your roof, pay attention to those overhangs. Okay, so this part is pretty straightforward. We are going to place some glue all along that roof surface that we just created with the flaps. Then attach your roof piece right on top. Again, check the overhangs and press down. You can go in with a tool to get those edges to stick securely. You will see parts of the flaps peeking out of this cutout, but these will be hidden once we attach the steeple. Now the main building is done, so let's attach the steeple. Here it is, and this is how it will attach to the roof. Your glue will sit on these little flaps, so open them up a little to make sure we get full contact with the roof. Then place glue on these flaps and be generous with your glue here. We're also going to place glue on the roof around that cutout. Now we're ready to attach the steeple, and keep track of where that seam is on your steeple so that you can place it so that that seam is at the back. Press down firmly, but not too much. We don't want the roof to cave in. Now I'm not really happy with that little bit of spacing in the seams, so I'm going in with my paintbrush to press down those edges. You probably can't really tell here, but when I swing around to the back, you can really see there's a gaping crevice here that I can't leave alone. So I'm just going in with my paintbrush and pushing underneath to close that gap. And another one on this side. And you can go around and around doing this until your glue sets to make sure those gaps don't open up again. And finally, we can attach the roof of the steeple. This is just going to sit on top like this, so we're going to place lots of glue on this edge. Now take your roof, position it so the seam is in the back, and then place it on top. This is better if you do it from the front angle so that you can make sure it's straight. And just check all the sides to see that the overhang looks good. And that's it, your church is done. And here in this large back opening is how you get a tea light into the church. And of course, please use a flameless tea light. I get mine on Amazon, which I'll link below. They last for hours and hours. That's it, guys. Thanks for following along. I hope you enjoyed this one.